right, thank you. Today we're going to be going over what to do 10 years before retirement. Most of the videos we've done before or lectures have been pretty much specific on one topic. This is going to be kind of a broad overview of the things that you need to be thinking about and what you need to accomplish 10 years before you retire. One of the biggest things you need to do here is to avoid the big mistakes. So we're going to talk about these and I'll come back to them. First, how long are you going to live? You're going to live to 75, 85, 105? There's a lot of different considerations of what you need to do with your money, your time, your house, etc., if that's the case. What are you going to do in retirement? I mean, what does your life look like? If you're going to successfully transition from working to retirement, you need to have a plan at what you're going to do the day after you retire. Another big consideration here are your kids and parents independent? Are you going to need to keep supporting your kids? Are you going to need to support your parents? Also, you need to make a will, and you need to make a will right now. If you pass away without a will, the state already has a will prepared for you, and so your assets are going to be distributed depending upon what the state feels. If you're two spouses and one of the spouses dies in a community property state, that does not mean that all the assets go to the husband or go to the wife. That's not what's going to happen. The state is going to split those assets, and typically half of the assets are going to go to the spouse, and the other half of the assets are going to go to other people, such as the children. Some of the other big mistakes, are you going to move? Are you going to stay in your house? Do you plan on doing lots of international travel? Are you physically going to be able to do international travel, and what kind of costs are associated with that? And also, do you plan on opening up a business so that you have something to do in retirement? So coming back and looking at these individually. All right, how long are you going to live? Well, first off, talk to your doctor. If you have some physical problems, ask him what he thinks your life expectancy is going to be. Obviously, if you've got severe issues and you have a life expectancy of 5 years or 10 years, or he doesn't know if you're going to even make it to retirement, then those are much, much different scenarios than I'm really healthy, how long am I going to live? One of the things you want to look at, because a big component of longevity is genetics. How long do your parents live? How long did your grandparents live? Are your brothers and sisters still alive? What about great aunts and uncles? In my life, I've been pretty blessed with longevity genetics. 3 of my 4 grandparents lived into their 90s. All my great aunts and uncles all lived into their late 80s and late 90s. Parents are still alive. Brothers and sisters are all still alive. And so the odds of me passing away at the average life expectancy is very small. So therefore, I need to make adjustments, and I plan on probably living to about 105 for a number of reasons. And so once again, don't look at average life expectancy. If you go with your average life expectancy of 83, 85, 87, or wherever that might be, that means you got a 50% chance of spending all your money and still being alive and being destitute. Not a great plan. When we talk about extending life expectancy, there are so many medical advances that have taken place over the years. Life expectancy, turn of the century was in the mid-40s. By the 20s, 30s, it had pushed near 60. Now we're in the early 80s. By 2050, we easily could push that life expectancy near 100. One of the big technologies that's taking place right now is the 3D printers. Right now, we can actually print a perfect size heart with all the chambers and vessels and everything perfectly. Now, that's used for practicing surgery and stuff like that, but it's not a big leap that we're going to be able to change the materials from plastics and rubber to some sort of living mesh material or something that would take living tissue, so that actually if you've got a heart problem, maybe we just print you a new heart and they put in a new heart. While right now that might seem ridiculous, if you look at back in the 1920s, Open heart surgery was considered ridiculous. First open heart surgery was 1965. And so I really believe that life expectancy is going to be pushed out at least 10 years by 2050 due to changes in medical technology. What am I going to do when I retire? Right? That's a big question. It is very hard to just go find a hobby, saying, well, I'm going to work, and then, you know what, I'm going to go golf, or I'm going to start to garden, or I'm going to do something else. That tends not to happen. And so right now, 10 years from now, you need to start refining what you think you're going to do. What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy gardening? Do you want to get involved with local theater? Do you want to volunteer at your church? If you think you want to do a lot of church volunteering, you probably want to start sitting on a couple boards to see what types of jobs are available. What do you like? What do you find a passion? You need to work your way that way. Some people think, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy an RV and hit the road. A lot of people romanticize it, and then they buy an RV for $300,000 and hate it. And next thing you know, they'll go on 3 trips, and they sell it 5 years later, and they lose $200,000. So at this point, 10 years out, if you think you want to go RVing and hit the road, you should be renting an RV and going on vacations. Go on a 2-week trip to Alaska. Go back south. And you might find that, hey, you know what? I don't like this. Or you might find, I love this. We definitely want to do it. You might find, hey, a 26-foot trailer is perfect for me because you can rent different sizes. Or maybe we want a 5th wheel. Lots of different options. You need to rent, drive, and try these things before you go drop $200,000, $300,000. And if you're going to buy some of those all decked out ones that are like converted buses, those are $500,000, $750,000 for those things. Not inexpensive at all. All right. So, are your parents independent? And what's the likelihood that you're going to have to support them during your retirement? This is really critical. You need to sit down and have an honest conversation with your mom and dad. The easiest icebreaker in this situation is, you know, are you going to be okay if you live to 100? You know, we're thinking of doing some bequests to charity. I just want to make sure you and mom are okay before we obligate this money this way, because if you guys might need help if you live into your late 90s, we want to save that money and keep it aside for you. So you need that open conversation. You need to be respectful and understand that you're probably not going to get the real answers if they have financial problems. You need to look towards other signs that they're struggling. Unable to do maintenance on a house. Not buying prescriptions. Various things. You just need to keep your eyes open. And you're probably not going to necessarily get the right answer. I mean, mom and dad probably are not going to turn over to you the amounts of all their bank accounts, lists of all their assets. Because if you have conversations with your children, you're probably not going to turn over all your asset lists and how much money you have and everything else. A lot of times that is very, very personal, and people play that information really close to the vest, even with family. Are your kids independent? So if we look back in the 1800s, when do kids become an adult? The 1800s, when you hit 13, you were an adult and you went and got a job. And by the time you were 16, 17, you were married and you died in your late 40s. By 1950s, we actually introduced kind of this idea of adolescence, where you had this adolescent time between 13 and 18 where you kind of grew into an adult. Now, today, 2015, I think a lot of times we look at kids and go, are you an adult at 24? And a lot of people say no, they're still living at home, they're being supported by mom and dad. This is extremely common, and it's been a culture shift. And this culture shift exists for a number of reasons. One, we're living longer. The economy and disposable income is much, much higher. And if you want a really well-paying job that you're going to be able to do for 50 years, more likely than not, you're going to be 5, 6 years in college by the time you can get through all your classes. So therefore, now we get through this adolescence at 18. Now we've got a whole host of people that aren't going to go out right then and be able to find a good job like they could in the 50s, whether it was mining or becoming a mechanic or doing air conditioning repair, whatever that is. Most people need to go to trade school or to college, and that's extended that time period more. I even have friends that their kids are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're still supporting them. And that's not a good thing. You need to move kids towards independence, and also parents. So if you're going to help family, any family, especially parents or kids, you need to promote independence. So what are some good uses of money, right? We're going to pay for school books for kids who have a timeline to graduate. That is giving them money that is going to help them long run be independent. If they get a new job, say in New York, and it pays really well and it's a big step up, but man, it's a lot of money and getting into an apartment, and there's different wardrobe expectations out in New York, and so maybe you give one-time money that's going to help that transition and buy new clothes. A down payment on a house helps make people more independent. Buying a good car for your kids to get to and from school, or they get their first real job and they're going to buy them a car to get to and from work so that then they can start working and saving and get promoted and become more independent. Bad help creates dependence, and that's what you want to avoid, because otherwise you're just paying and paying and paying, and not only is it destructive to your retirement plans and your own finances, it's destructive to your parents or your children who you are supporting. So what are some bad help, right? Paying ongoing rent because your kids just can't find a job. That's not good. McDonald's is almost certainly hiring. They can get a job at McDonald's, work full-time, become a shift manager, and it doesn't take too long to be making $15, $18 at McDonald's. Is it a great job? No, it's not. But to sit home and do nothing and wait for a job to come to them does not teach them independence. It teaches them to be a victim, and it teaches them to rely on your money. Also, let's say that your mom's at the India casino all the time and dropping all her money there, and then she can't pay rent. You're not helping her by paying her rent. You're helping her by not paying her rent and doing all that you can to get her into Gamblers Anonymous or AA or whatever type of program will help move her towards independence. Paying for school expenses for a child on their 5th major. Working here at the college, there are a lot of students, early 30s, still in the community college system. They've got about 9 different AA degrees, and they just keep coming, and mom and dad keep shoveling money into them. That's never going to transition them to being independent. They need to finish a major, get out, get a job, and if they want to take classes for fun, then come back on your own dime and take ceramics and all those other types of fun classes. Another bad use of money is paying rent or car expenses for children just so they can have a better car or better apartment. What you're doing here is you are artificially increasing their standard of living. And what's going to happen is they're going to get used to living that standard of living, and next thing you know, they're going to expect it. And if you pull that away, they're going to go try to replace it, and they'll end up spending more money, borrowing money, not saving anything, and everything goes into consumption. All right, that's not a good thing. So once again, and I've spent a lot of time on this because it's really critical. I've seen a lot of financial situations where parents and children are just draining families to the point that nobody's going to be able to retire well. They're going to have to work an extra 3-5 years just to pay for this. It's not good. So once again, goal is independence. If you're going to give one-time money, in other words, here's a chunk of money, That should place the kids or your parents in a much better position, and it's not going to require additional money. So the example here that I give is down payment money for a house that they still cannot afford is not good one-time money. If good one-time money is they can afford the house, they just need an extra $10, $12, $15,000 to get that down payment, that's available to you without destroying your financial plan, then that's fine. Although it by far is not your obligation to give kids money for a down payment. Any ongoing help requires an end date. So if you have a child moving to New York or they're transitioning jobs, you say they just can't make it because they're starting a new job, they're doing this, they have a probationary period, and they have to pick up their own medical expenses, whatever that is. If you're giving ongoing money, you need to be very clear about how much you're willing to give and the end date. Do not leave this at a situation that says, well, we'll help you out until you get on your feet. Because then a lot of times children will never get on their feet because you're always sending them money. There's no fire lit under them to improve their situation. So you need that deadline, and that then creates that fire. It's much better for the kids, long run. So what are some of the other mistakes? Obviously, you need to make a will, or the state needs to do it for you. You can buy computer programs like Willmaker. There's a number of them out there. If you do buy a computer-generated one, don't go to the bargain bin and buy the 2-year-old Willmaker on sale for $10. You're already saving probably a lot of money. There might have been a lot of law changes, statute changes, or something else that happened in the last 2 years, so that now that's actually a void or voidable will that you've created because you didn't cover something that is now a statutory requirement. So buy the current year if you're going to do that. A lot of people plan on moving. This really is a bad idea for most people. So a lot of people say, what I'm going to do is we're going to sell our house here, move someplace that's cheaper, buy a house in Alabama or something like that, and then we've got a lot of our equity to live on. Most people that do that are not happy. A couple things. One, property taxes tend to be very high in states with low income taxes. And so you're buying it at a time and paying lots of property taxes. A lot of times people miss all their friends and family, so they fly back and vacation and rent, and that costs them a lot of money. Some people know that it's just a mistake, and they turn around, sell the house, and move again. So really be planning that idea of, are we going to move to a different location? If you're from the South and you love Alabama and you came out here for 10 years and you're finishing up jobs and you're thinking, all I want to do is I want to get back to Alabama, back to Texas, back to Oklahoma, wherever it is, then certainly it makes sense. You're going to move back with family, back into the local community you know, rekindle friends and other relationships, then that makes complete sense. One of the other things that people plan on doing a lot of times when they retire is to do a lot of international travel. Now, international travel is tiring, very, very tiring. I was sitting, in fact, I changed all my plans for international travel, sitting with my mom and dad and about 4 or 5 of their friends. And we were all out to eat, and we started talking about different things. And I mentioned, well, I can't wait to retire. I'm going to probably travel to Europe and do a few other things. And all of them shook their head and say, you need to do your international travel in your 50s because it's exhausting. So a couple of the couples went on one international trip and then said they physically can't do it. One of the other couples that's very well off, quite frankly, said, we can do international travel, but we have to fly first class so that we can lie down. Otherwise, if we don't sleep, we just can't recover. Recently, I went on a big trip over to the Middle East, and from the time I left my house, got through LAX, over through Istanbul, back into Lebanon, I'm looking at 30 hours. I was 30 hours till I put my head on a pillow. That's exhausting. And that's exhausting for me and I'm not quite 50 yet. If you're 75 or 85, can you handle that? So most good advice that I've heard, you should try to do your international travel in your 50s. When you're 65, 75, you travel within your continent, say the continental United States, Canada, down into Mexico. There's lots of great places throughout all of the United States to travel. And then as you even get older, you kind of shrink that down because the travel gets exhausting. So if your plan is to save a bunch of money and then travel internationally on these 27 countries in 29 days, that's going to be tough at 75. Some people also decide, hey, once I retire, I can go out and open a business. What happens if it fails? Or I hate it? You got to be real careful here not to buy yourself a job. If you think you want to open a new business, then you should probably try to take a part-time job in that business or do various things and see if you like it or not. All right, what are some financial considerations that we have? So for the case of this, I'm going to assume you already know the difference between savings and investing. You've seen all the time value of money videos, and so I don't need to go back over that. First off, a lot of people 10 years out, they think they got to shift most of their money into cash and bonds, and that's just simply not true. You need to be 10 years out 60 to 100% in stocks. When I'm 10 years out, I'm going to be in 100% stocks. Two reasons. One, the portion of your Social Security that you're going to get acts just like cash or bonds. If you have a pension coming your way, that pension is like having bonds. That's very safe money, that's stable, that's not going to change much over time, so there's kind of your base. So if you shift a lot of your stocks into bonds, then you end up way overweighted with fixed instruments, and we don't want to get there. Plus, if you're 10 years from retirement, you're not going to use any of this money for 10 years. Some of it not for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. That money still has to grow. In fact, when you're at retirement, I still think you probably should be near 60, 70% stocks, depending on how much money you have, what your pension is, Social Security, certainly lots of considerations, but you need to stay invested in equities for growth. The other thing you need you to do is obviously to project how much your retirement lifestyle is going to cost. If you plan on moving to a house in Newport Beach, traveling through Europe 6 months out of the year, getting a yacht, and hitting the road for these great vacations, that's going to be expensive. If your plan is you want to move back to Montana, have a shack, get up in the morning, put your fishing pole out in a stream, and catch breakfast, that's got a very different cost structure. So while we're trying to figure out how much money we need to save, we need to figure out how much money we need that we're going to be spending. And there's a couple of videos on how to project retirement income that you need to go to. What are some other things that we need to do? First, we need to project all our investment values using time value money, depending on how aggressive you're invested. If you have a pension at work, you need to make an appointment with Human Resources. You make that appointment with Human Resources. Typically, Human Resources will give you a breakout once you've crossed 50 of what your pension would be if you retire at 55, at 60, at 62, at 65, at 67. They'll generate these reports for you. You need to get them so that you have some idea of how much money is coming your way, so you know, am I going to be short? Do I need to save more? Have I saved enough? Do I need to get more aggressive with my investments? Am I doing so well that I can dial back and actually be safer in my investments? All right. One of the other things that I don't want you to do, and I've seen people do this a lot, is they plan on funding their retirement with the inheritance when their mom and dad dies. And while in some cases this makes sense, two things. What if your parents spend all their money? What if something happens and they have a huge financial catastrophe and everything gets stolen? What happens if they just flat live to 108? And so you're 89 years old still waiting for your inheritance. Probably not a really good idea there. I also want you to set a plan 10 years out to pay off all your debt, all your credit cards, all your car loans. In my opinion, you should also pay off your house. Now, there are a number of people who think that this is a bad idea, and their argument is certainly valid, but I look at a paid-off home as two things: an emergency store of cash, and you have rent prepaid for the rest of your life. You got maintenance and stuff like that, sure, but basically we've taken a huge expense and eliminated it. So that's how I look at that. I think your home should be paid off. The other thing I'd like you to do at this point is see a fee-only financial planner. Now, a fee-only planner is different than most financial planners. Most financial planners that you sit down with at, say, Fidelity or Vanguard or some other company like that, what they do is they look at your situation and they offer you an array of products: stocks, bonds, insurance, real estate, whatever it is, for you to buy. And then they make a commission off that sale. Now, their advice does not have to be good advice. It just can't be bad advice or fraudulent advice. Because those planners are commission planners, and you know they're earning a commission, and you know that they're a salesperson, that they have a self-interest in the sale, then you should know that they are not unbiased in their offerings. It's the same as if you go down to a Ford dealership and you have 3 kids and you say, well, you know, what car is the best for me? And they're at Ford, they're running a special on Mustangs. And they say, you know what, you need a Mustang. And you'll look good in it, and you don't want to be old, and the 3 kids will fit in the back of the Mustang. Now, they'll only fit there for another month, but still, they're going to fit. He can sell you that Mustang, no problem. Inappropriate car. You're not going to expect that that salesperson is going to turn around and say, well, you know what, you got to own 1 minivan in your life. You got 3 small kids. I got a friend that works at Honda, and they've got in a whole bunch of Odysseys, minivans. Those are so great for families. You know, you should get one of those. You know, you got to suffer through for 8-10 years, and then you can move on to something else, and then 20 years from now come back and let's get you a Mustang after the kids are grown. You don't expect them to do that. So you cannot expect a planner who's getting commission to sell you the exact correct product for you. A fee-only planner is different in that they charge a flat fee for advice. So you're going to pay, say, $2,000 or $1,000, depending on how complex things are, as low as $500. If you've got your own business and lots of stuff going on and millions of dollars, that plan could run $5,000, $7,000 on complexity. But what they're going to do is give you advice. And they're going to give you a printed report that has all your assets, all your liabilities, all the projections, how they think you should invest. And that, by law, has to be good fiduciary advice. You can then take that plan and take it to any place, Fidelity, Vanguard, independent brokers, and implement that plan. But you're buying the plan. And so that, I think, is critical to make sure that you're on the path that you think is correct. $1,000 or $1,500 is cheap to correct a major flaw that maybe you have in your plan. All right, and that is the end of what I think you should do 10 years before retirement. Thank you.